Number 1 is Ted Kaczynski. Born on May 22, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, Theodore John Kaczynski was a mathematical prodigy destined for greatness. At just 16 years old, he entered Harvard University, already recognized as a genius among geniuses. But Harvard wasn't just an education, it became a trauma. Ted participated in a psychological study led by Professor Henry Murray, sessions that subjected him to severe emotional abuse, attacking his deepest beliefs and sense of self. These experiments would haunt him for the rest of his life, planting seeds of rage and alienation that would later blossom into violence. Described as brilliant yet profoundly isolated, Ted skipped grades throughout his education, excelling academically while struggling desperately to connect with peers. His classmates called him a walking brain, a compliment that felt like a curse. By 25, he had become the youngest assistant professor at UC Berkeley, teaching advanced mathematics to students barely younger than himself. But something inside him fractured. In 1969, without warning or explanation, he abruptly resigned from his prestigious position. He fled civilization entirely, retreating to the Montana wilderness where he built a tiny 10 by 12-foot cabin without electricity, running water, or any connection to the modern world he had come to despise. There, surrounded by trees and crushing silence, the genius mathematician became a hermit. He watched helplessly as the forest he loved was destroyed by industrial expansion, logging operations carving through pristine wilderness. And that destruction ignited a rage that would consume him and the lives of innocents for nearly 2 decades. From 1978 to 1995, Ted Kaczynski waged a solitary methodical war against modern technology and the society that embraced it. He mailed and hand-planted 16 bombs across America, targeting universities, airlines, and computer stores with calculated precision. 3 people died in agony. 23 more were permanently maimed, their bodies torn apart by shrapnel and explosives. His first bomb, placed at the University of Illinois Chicago in May 1978, injured a security guard who was simply doing his job. But Kaczynski's attacks grew increasingly sophisticated over time, meticulously crafted devices hidden in innocent-looking wooden boxes, each one inscribed with the cryptic initials FC for Freedom Club, an organization that existed only in his mind. In 1979, a bomb he smuggled aboard American Airlines Flight 444 filled the cabin with thick smoke, forcing an emergency landing and terrifying everyone aboard. In 1985, Sacramento computer store owner Hugh Scruton was killed instantly by a nail-filled bomb left in a parking lot, the first fatality in Kaczynski's campaign of terror. In 1987, Gary Wright lost his arm to flying shrapnel in Salt Lake City, his life forever altered in a split second of violence. In 1993, geneticist Charles Epstein and computer scientist David Gelernter were both grievously maimed by mail bombs, their brilliant careers nearly ended by a man who saw their work as an affront to nature. In 1994, advertising executive Thomas Mosser was killed by a package bomb at his New Jersey home, dying in front of his family. In 1995, timber lobbyist Gilbert Murray died the moment he opened what appeared to be an ordinary package. Kaczynski was meticulous, paranoid, brilliant. He left false clues deliberately designed to mislead investigators. He used untraceable materials purchased with cash. He wore disguises and never left fingerprints. His targets weren't random. They represented technology, progress, modernity itself. Everything he believed was destroying humanity's connection to nature. In 1995, he sent a 35,000-word manifesto titled Industrial Society and Its Future to the New York Times and the Washington Post, demanding its publication with a chilling ultimatum: publish it or more bombs would follow. After intense debate, the FBI made the controversial decision to publish the manifesto, hoping someone would recognize the writing. That gamble paid off. His own brother, David Kaczynski, recognized Ted's unique phrasing and philosophical obsessions in the published text. The Unabomber investigation had become the FBI's longest and most expensive manhunt in history. For 17 years, Ted Kaczynski remained a ghost, always one step ahead. Then came the manifesto. David Kaczynski, torn between family loyalty and moral duty, contacted the FBI in February 1996, providing them with letters and documents that matched the manifesto's distinctive style. On April 3, 1996, federal agents surrounded Ted's remote Montana cabin in a carefully coordinated operation. Inside, they found a treasure trove of evidence: bomb-making materials, detailed diagrams, journals meticulously documenting every single attack. Kaczynski was arrested without resistance, standing calmly as agents secured his tiny cabin. He tried desperately to represent himself at trial, wanting to use the courtroom as a platform for his anti-technology ideology. But his lawyers insisted he was mentally ill, pushing for an insanity defense Ted absolutely refused to accept. Facing the death penalty and exhausted by legal battles, he pleaded guilty in January 1998 to all 13 federal charges. Judge Garland Burrell Jr. sentenced him to life imprisonment without any possibility of parole, 8 consecutive life terms ensuring he would die in prison. Ted Kaczynski was sent to ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, where he spent 23 hours every day in solitary confinement in a concrete cell measuring 7 feet by 12 feet. He continued writing prolifically, corresponding with academics and journalists, always insisting his violent actions were philosophically justified. He never expressed genuine remorse for the lives he destroyed. In 2023, at age 81, Ted Kaczynski was found dead in his cell at the Federal Medical Center in North Carolina, where he had been transferred for health reasons. Authorities determined it was an apparent suicide by hanging. His manifesto still circulates widely online, praised by anti-technology extremists who see him as a prophet. His victims' families never found the closure they desperately sought. The Unabomber remains a chilling reminder that genius does not equal morality, that intelligence without empathy breeds monsters capable of unimaginable cruelty. A child prodigy, a Harvard scholar, a hermit bomber living in absolute isolation. Ted Kaczynski genuinely believed he was saving humanity from itself, that his bombs were necessary violence against an industrial system destroying the natural world. But his self-righteous crusade left families permanently shattered, bodies broken beyond repair, and a legacy of terror that will never be forgotten. Was he a philosopher-terrorist with a coherent ideology, or simply a profoundly damaged man who weaponized his brilliance to justify murder? The question haunts us still, with no easy answers. Perhaps the most dangerous prisons aren't built of concrete and steel at all, but of ideology, isolation, and the kind of rage that consumes everything it touches. Before we continue with the next case, ask yourself this: how many other geniuses are out there right now, isolated and angry, one bad decision away from becoming the next headline? If stories like these make you question the thin line between brilliance and madness, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These are the cases that change how you see the world, and we're just getting started. Number 2 is Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán. Born April 4, 1957 in La Tuna, Badiraguato, Sinaloa, Mexico, Joaquin Archivaldo Guzmán Lora grew up in crushing, dehumanizing poverty that shaped every choice he would later make. His father, a cattle rancher and opium farmer, beat him regularly and brutally. Young Joaquin sold oranges on roadsides to survive, dropped out of school in 3rd grade, and learned to cultivate marijuana and opium poppies before he was even a teenager, skills that would define his future. His nickname, El Chapo, Spanish for Shorty, was meant to mock his 5 feet 6 inches frame, but his ambition was towering, limitless, terrifying. By his 20s, he had left the impoverished mountains and joined organized crime under drug lord Hector Palma Salazar, quickly proving himself ruthless, efficient, and absolutely fearless. If drug shipments were late, El Chapo shot the smugglers himself without hesitation or remorse. In the 1980s, he worked for Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, known as the godfather of Mexico's powerful Guadalajara cartel. When Gallardo was arrested in 1989, Joaquin Guzmán seized control of what would become the Sinaloa cartel. He was just 32 years old. His empire would grow into the most powerful, sophisticated, and deadly drug trafficking organization in human history. El Chapo didn't just run a cartel. He transformed drug trafficking into a multi-billion-dollar global empire that operated like a Fortune 500 corporation. His Sinaloa cartel smuggled massive quantities of cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and marijuana into the United States and Europe, generating billions of dollars in annual revenue. He pioneered sophisticated tunnels beneath the US-Mexico border, complete with professional lighting, ventilation systems, and rail tracks for moving product efficiently. He used submarines, small aircraft, and trucks equipped with hidden compartments. He corrupted officials at every level of government: police chiefs, military commanders, politicians, judges. Everyone had a price, and El Chapo knew exactly what it was. He personally ordered thousands of executions without blinking. Conservative estimates link him directly to 34,000 deaths. Rivals tortured for days, beheaded publicly, dissolved in barrels of acid. Women and children were never spared if they stood in his way or threatened his operations. In 1992, his sicarios, hired assassins, opened fire inside a crowded Guadalajara nightclub, attempting to kill rival cartel leaders. 6 completely innocent people died in the crossfire. In 1993, his gunman murdered Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo at Guadalajara International Airport. 14 bullets in what was officially labeled a case of mistaken identity, though many suspected otherwise. His cartel waged brutal, unrelenting wars against the Tijuana Cartel, the Juarez Cartel, and Los Zetas. Bodies hung from highway bridges as warnings. Severed heads rolled through streets. Entire families were massacred. Mexico became an active war zone, and El Chapo was the general commanding one side. Yet he lived lavishly: multiple mansions, private yachts, even personal zoos. Forbes magazine named him one of the world's most powerful people for years. The DA called him as dangerous and influential as Pablo Escobar ever was. And then he did something that solidified his legend. He escaped from maximum security prisons not once, but twice. In 2001, he was smuggled out hidden in a laundry cart after bribing nearly everyone in the facility. In 2015, he escaped again through a mile-long tunnel dug directly beneath his cell, complete with motorcycle tracks and lighting. Both times, he had bribed guards, prison officials, and entire institutional systems. Nothing and no one could hold him. Mexican and U.S. authorities hunted El Chapo for decades in what became one of the most expensive manhunts in history. He was first arrested in Guatemala in 1993 and extradited to Mexico, sentenced to 20 years in prison. But in 2001, he escaped and remained free for 13 years. He was finally recaptured in February 2014 in Mazatlan, Sinaloa. But just 6 months later, he pulled off that infamous tunnel escape. The manhunt intensified with unprecedented international cooperation. On January 8, 2016, Mexican Marines raided a safe house in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, after a deadly shootout. Guzmán was captured while desperately trying to flee through underground sewers. In January 2017, he was extradited to the United States to face justice in a country where he couldn't simply bribe his way to freedom. His trial in a heavily fortified Brooklyn federal courthouse lasted 3 grueling months. Over 50 witnesses testified: former cartel associates, frightened accomplices, survivors. The evidence presented was absolutely overwhelming and undeniable. On July 17, 2019, Judge Brian Cogan sentenced Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán to life imprisonment plus 30 additional years, and ordered him to forfeit $12.6 billion in ill-gotten proceeds. He is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, locked in solitary confinement 23 hours daily in a 7-by-12-foot concrete cell. He will never see daylight again. He will never feel rain. He will die in that cage. His sons, known collectively as Los Chapitos, now lead violent factions of the Sinaloa cartel. The bloodshed continues unabated. El Chapo's wife, Emma Coronel Ispiro, was arrested in 2021 and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and money laundering before being released in 2023. From a desperately poor mountain village to the most secure prison in America, El Chapo's rise and fall is Shakespearean in its scope and brutality. He controlled entire nations through fear and corruption, bent governments to his will, and left rivers of blood flowing through Mexico for decades. Yet in the end, he was just a man, flesh and bone, mortal and fallible. A monster now trapped in a concrete cage, slowly being forgotten by the world he once terrorized through sheer force of will and violence. The cartel he built survives and thrives. The bloodshed continues without pause, and the endless war on drugs rages on, claiming new victims every single day, with no end in sight. Number 3 is Robert Hanssen. Born April 18, 1944, in Chicago, Illinois, Robert Philip Hanssen grew up in a cold, emotionally abusive household that shaped him in profound and damaging ways. His father, Howard Hanssen, a Chicago police officer, berated and belittled him constantly, creating a young man desperate for approval he would never receive. Young Robert was painfully shy, socially awkward, and fundamentally lonely. He excelled academically as an escape, graduating from Knox College with a chemistry degree in 1966, then earning an MBA from Northwestern University. He joined the Chicago Police Department in 1972 as an internal affairs investigator, specializing in forensic accounting and financial crimes. In 1976, at age 32, he achieved what seemed like a dream. He joined the FBI. His colleagues described him as brilliant but deeply odd, paranoid, intensely secretive, and obsessively religious in a way that felt performative. He had converted to Catholicism when he married Bernadette Bonnie Walk in 1968. Together they had 6 children. He attended daily mass without fail, joined the ultra-conservative Catholic organization Opus Dei, and presented himself to the world as a devout family man and patriotic American. But beneath that carefully constructed facade of piety and patriotism, Robert Hanssen harbored a devastating secret. He was a traitor to his country, and he would become the most damaging spy in American history. For 22 years, from 1979 to 2001, Robert Hanssen systematically sold America's most classified secrets to the Soviet Union and later Russia. He betrayed over 6,000 documents detailing U.S. nuclear war strategies, advanced military weapons technology, and sensitive counterintelligence operations that had taken decades to build. He revealed the identities of CIA and FBI agents working undercover in Russia, knowing full well what would happen to them. At least 3 were arrested, tortured, and executed, shot in the back of the head in basement cells. Dmitry Polyakov, a Soviet general who had been a crucial CIA informant for decades, was arrested in 1986 and executed in 1988 directly because of Hanssen's betrayal. Valery Martinov and Sergei Motorin, KGB officers secretly working for the FBI, were recalled to Moscow, subjected to brutal interrogation and torture, then killed. Hanssen exposed a multi-million-dollar FBI eavesdropping tunnel painstakingly built beneath the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., completely compromising years of intelligence work. He sabotaged ongoing investigations, including the case against State Department official Felix Bloch, allowing Soviet spies to escape justice and continue operating. He did it all for money, pure, simple greed. No political ideology. No grand philosophical justification. Just money. Over his decades of espionage, he received more than $1.4 million in cash, diamonds, and Rolex watches. He used elaborate dead drops in suburban parks, leaving packages of classified material taped under footbridges or hidden in drainage pipes, never meeting his Russian handlers face-to-face. He operated under multiple code names: Ramon Garcia, Jim Baker, Simply B. He was meticulous, paranoid, methodical in his tradecraft. He personally chose drop sites, used elaborate codes for dates and times, and left false trails. The most chilling aspect? He worked in the FBI's counterintelligence division, the very unit specifically tasked with catching Soviet spies. He was hunting himself, reviewing investigations that might expose him, and he successfully deflected suspicion for 2 full decades. The FBI suspected a high-level mole for years but couldn't identify him in 1994. They wrongly accused CIA officer Brian Kelly, surveilling him intensively for years while the real traitor continued operating. Then in 2000, the FBI paid $7 million to a Russian intelligence officer for a file on an anonymous mole codenamed B. The file contained an audio tape of the mole speaking to his KGB handler. FBI analyst Bob King recognized something distinctive, a unique phrase Hanssen often used, quoting General Patton's famous speech about the purple-pissing Japanese. Voice analysis confirmed it beyond doubt. Robert Hanssen was the mole. The FBI promoted him to FBI headquarters, giving him a meaningless job supervising computer security while they built their case. They assigned him a young assistant named Eric O'Neill, actually an undercover FBI surveillance specialist. O'Neill skillfully gained access to Hanssen's Palm Pilot, and extracted encrypted files containing damning proof. On February 18, 2001, FBI agents watched as Hanssen made a dead drop at Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia, carefully taping a garbage bag full of classified documents under a footbridge. They arrested him immediately. Hanssen asked calmly, with almost amusement, "What took you so long?" To avoid the death penalty, Robert Hanssen pleaded guilty on July 6, 2001, to 15 counts of espionage and conspiracy. On May 10, 2002, Judge Claude Hilton sentenced him to 15 consecutive life terms without any possibility of parole. "I apologize for my behavior. I am shamed by it," Hanssen said in court, his voice completely flat and emotionless. He was sent to ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, locked in solitary confinement 23 hours daily. He spent 21 years in that concrete tomb. On June 5, 2023, at age 79, Robert Hanssen was found dead in his cell. The cause: advanced colon cancer. His autopsy revealed he had deliberately stopped treatment months earlier, essentially choosing death over continued imprisonment. His wife Bonnie, who insisted throughout his trial that she never knew about his espionage activities, retired quietly from teaching theology at an Opus Dei school. His victims, the agents he coldly betrayed, their devastated families, the entire American intelligence apparatus he crippled, never received true justice. Only silence, only death, and the bitter knowledge that one man's greed cost lives, compromised national security, and shattered institutional trust for generations. An FBI agent sworn to protect his country. A devout Catholic who attended daily Mass and belonged to one of the church's most conservative organizations. A father of 6 who coached Little League. And simultaneously one of history's most destructive traitors. Robert Hanssen lived a double life so perfectly compartmentalized that even his wife, sleeping beside him for decades, never suspected anything. He destroyed lives and compromised national security without hesitation, all for money to fund a lifestyle slightly more comfortable than his FBI salary provided. What drives a man to betray absolutely everything he claims to believe in? Greed, pride, a need to feel smarter than everyone around him, or perhaps something even darker that we may never fully understand. If these stories of betrayal and hidden evil are keeping you hooked, show your support. Hit that like button right now. Every like tells us you want more deep dives into the minds of the world's most dangerous criminals. And trust me, what's coming next will make you question everyone you think you know. Number 4 is Terry Nichols. Born April 1, 1955, in Lapeer, Michigan, Terry Lynn Nichols grew up on a family farm, the third of 4 children in what appeared to be a normal, hardworking American family. His childhood seemed unremarkable. He helped his parents with daily chores, cared for injured farm animals with genuine compassion, and excelled academically, graduating high school in 1973 with an impressive 3.6 GPA. He dreamed earnestly of becoming a physician, of healing people and making a positive difference. But college didn't last. He dropped out after just 1 semester, unable to adjust or find his footing. He drifted aimlessly through various jobs over the next decade: farmer, carpenter, grain elevator manager, real estate agent. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt right. In 1980, he married Lana Walsh, a twice-divorced real estate agent 5 years his senior. They had a son in 1982, but the marriage was strained from the beginning. Nichols became a house husband, cooking and gardening while Lana worked, and the role reversal gnawed at him. In 1988, at age 33, desperate to escape farm life and find purpose, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. He was the oldest man in his basic training platoon at Fort Benning, Georgia, struggling painfully with physical training designed for men a decade younger. His fellow soldiers mockingly called him Grandpa, but during that brief military service, he met someone who would change his life forever: Timothy McVeigh. They bonded immediately over guns, survivalism, and increasingly radical anti-government ideology. Nichols requested a hardship discharge in May 1989 after less than a year of service when his wife filed for divorce. He returned to Michigan bitter, divorced, and adrift, and his friendship with McVeigh deepened into something far more dangerous than either man's family could have imagined. By the early 1990s, Terry Nichols had fully embraced extremist anti-government ideology, heavily influenced by the Ruby Ridge standoff in 1992 and the Waco siege in 1993. He attended meetings of sovereign citizen groups, declared himself a non-resident alien in bizarre legal filings, and formally renounced his U.S. citizenship in handwritten letters to county clerks. He refused to pay taxes, shouted at judges that the federal government had no jurisdiction over him. In 1993, Nichols and Timothy McVeigh watched the Waco siege end in flames on television. 76 people died, including 25 children. McVeigh and Nichols were absolutely enraged, seeing it as government murder. They began planning revenge. In September 1994, Nichols and McVeigh rented a storage shed and started methodically stockpiling bomb-making materials. They stole dynamite and blasting caps from a remote Kansas quarry. Nichols purchased massive quantities of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, 2 tons total, storing it carefully in multiple rental units. He robbed an Arkansas gun dealer named Roger Moore, stealing weapons and cash to fund their operation. On April 14, 1995, Nichols gave McVeigh money and helped him finalize every detail of the plan. On April 16, Easter Sunday, they drove together to Oklahoma City to strategically plant McVeigh's getaway car. On April 18, 1995, at a remote lake near Harrington, Kansas, Nichols helped McVeigh mix the bomb, ammonium nitrate fertilizer combined with nitromethane racing fuel, carefully packed into 13 55-gallon barrels inside a rented Ryder truck. The next morning, April 19, 1995, at exactly 9:02 a.m., Timothy McVeigh detonated that massive truck bomb outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City. The explosion was catastrophic, ripping through the building and collapsing the entire north face. 168 people died, including 19 small children in a daycare center on the second floor. Over 680 others were injured. Glass shattered for blocks. Bodies were buried in tons of rubble. It was the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in American history until September 11, 2001. Terry Nichols was safely home in Kansas when the bomb exploded. He watched the news coverage showing the destruction. He said nothing to anyone. He did nothing. He simply waited. Within days, investigators traced the Ryder truck's axle, found in the rubble, to a rental agency in Junction City, Kansas. McVeigh was quickly identified and arrested on April 19 for an unrelated traffic violation. On April 21, Terry Nichols learned through news reports that he was wanted for questioning. He voluntarily surrendered to authorities. The FBI meticulously searched his home in Harrington, Kansas. They found blasting caps, detonating cords, ammonium nitrate residue, 33 firearms, extensive anti-government literature, and a receipt for fertilizer with McVeigh's fingerprints. They discovered a hand-drawn map of downtown Oklahoma City with the Murrah Building clearly marked. Nichols was arrested and charged on May 10, 1995. In December 1997, a federal jury convicted him of conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction and 8 counts of involuntary manslaughter for the deaths of federal law enforcement officers. But they acquitted him of first-degree murder, unable to reach a unanimous verdict on whether he deserved the death penalty. The jury deadlocked 9-3 in favor of execution. On June 4, 1998, Judge Richard Match sentenced Terry Nichols to life imprisonment without parole, calling him an enemy of the Constitution. But Oklahoma wasn't finished. In 2004, state prosecutors tried Nichols again on 161 counts of state murder, 1 for each non-federal victim. The jury convicted him on all counts but again deadlocked on the death penalty. Number 5 is Eric Rudolph. Eric Robert Rudolph was born September 19, 1966, in Merritt Island, Florida. His father, a carpenter, died of cancer when Eric was still young, leaving his mother struggling to raise 5 children alone. She eventually moved the family to rural western North Carolina, near the vast Nantahala National Forest, where Eric learned to hunt, fish, and survive in true wilderness. He dropped out of high school in 9th grade but later earned a GED. As a teenager, he drifted without direction, working odd jobs, reading survivalist literature obsessively, and gradually embracing radical anti-government and militant anti-abortion ideology. He joined the U.S. Army in 1987, where he trained as an explosives expert, but was discharged after less than 2 years for smoking marijuana. By the 1990s, Rudolph had become a Christian identity extremist, believing in white supremacy, vehemently opposing abortion and homosexuality, and utterly despising the federal government. He lived alone in the mountains, systematically stockpiling weapons and explosives. He was a loner, a fanatic, a man convinced he was a soldier in God's army, and he was building bombs with sophisticated designs. His targets would be chosen carefully, deliberately, and his campaign of terror would begin at the world's biggest stage, the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia. On July 27, 1996, the entire world watched as elite athletes competed in Centennial Olympic Park in Atlanta. Thousands of spectators filled the park late into the night, enjoying free concerts and Olympic celebrations. At 12:57 a.m., Eric Rudolph carefully planted a military-style backpack containing a pipe bomb surrounded by masonry nails, specifically designed to maximize human carnage and suffering. At 1:20 a.m., he called 911 twice from payphones, warning in a muffled voice, "There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes." Security guard Richard Jewell discovered the suspicious backpack and immediately began evacuating the immediate area. But there wasn't enough time. At 1:25 a.m., the bomb detonated with devastating force. The explosion instantly killed 44-year-old Alice Hawthorne, who had traveled from Albany, Georgia, with her teenage daughter to watch the Olympics and experience the magic firsthand. A Turkish cameraman, Melih Yüzynyal, suffered a fatal heart attack while running to film the chaotic aftermath. Over 100 people were injured. Shrapnel tore through legs, arms, abdomens. Nails embedded deep in flesh. Blood pooled on concrete. Panic and terror spread. The Olympics continued after a brief pause, but the world had fundamentally changed. The sense of safety had been shattered. Rudolph wasn't finished, he was just getting started. On January 16, 1997, he bombed the Northside Family Planning Services Clinic in Sandy Springs, Georgia, injuring 6 people. On February 21, 1997, he bombed the Other Side Lounge, an Atlanta lesbian nightclub, injuring 5 more. Then, on January 29, 1998, he struck his deadliest blow yet. A powerful bomb exploded at the New Woman All-Women Health Care Clinic in Birmingham, Alabama. Off-duty police officer Robert Sandy Sanderson was killed instantly, his body torn apart. Nurse Emily Lyons was catastrophically injured. She lost an eye permanently. Her left hand was completely shredded. Nails were embedded throughout her body. She somehow survived 22 agonizing surgeries. Her life saved but forever altered. Rudolph's bombs were frighteningly sophisticated. Time devices. Secondary bombs specifically designed to kill first responders who came to help. He used nails, screws, dynamite, and military explosives. His motivation was crystal clear. He violently opposed abortion, homosexuality, and what he contemptuously called the aberrant sexual conduct of modern society. He saw himself as a righteous soldier in God's army, striking at what he believed were forces of evil. He was a terrorist, pure and simple. The FBI launched a massive, unprecedented manhunt. Witnesses identified a suspicious man near the Birmingham clinic. A truck was traced directly to Eric Rudolph. On May 5, 1998, the FBI officially placed Rudolph on the 10 most wanted fugitives list, offering a $1 million reward for information. Rudolph vanished completely into the mountains of western North Carolina, where he had grown up. For 5 long years, he survived in the wilderness like an animal, hiding in caves, stealing food from dumpsters behind grocery stores, living off the land. The FBI searched relentlessly, deploying helicopters, tracking dogs, and hundreds of ground teams. But Rudolph was a highly skilled outdoorsman. He knew every trail, every hiding place, every cave. On May 31, 2003, at 4 a.m., a rookie police officer named Jeffrey Postel spotted a thin, bearded man rummaging through a trash bin behind a grocery store in Murphy, North Carolina. Postel approached cautiously and arrested Eric Rudolph without incident. Rudolph was emaciated, filthy, unshaven, but completely unrepentant about his crimes to avoid the death penalty. Eric Rudolph pleaded guilty on April 8, 2005, to all charges against him. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without any possibility of parole. In exchange for the plea deal, he agreed to lead authorities to 250 pounds of dynamite he had carefully buried in various locations throughout the North Carolina mountains. At his sentencing hearing, Rudolph remained utterly defiant, offering absolutely no apology to his victims or their families. Judge Stephen Taylor then sentenced Nichols to 161 consecutive life sentences, the longest prison sentence ever imposed on a single individual in U.S. history. Nichols is incarcerated at ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, held in solitary confinement on Bombers Row, alongside other domestic terrorists. He has shown no genuine remorse for his actions. He consistently claims McVeigh manipulated and used him, that he didn't fully understand what the bomb was for. Victims' families remain haunted and angry. Many believe justice was never fully served because Nichols avoided execution. 168 lives stolen in seconds. 168 families permanently shattered. 19 children who never got to grow up. And 1 coward still breathing in a concrete cage, pathetically claiming he didn't know what the bomb was really for, despite mixing the explosives with his own hands. Terry Nichols was not the mastermind. That was Timothy McVeigh, who was executed in 2001. Nichols was the accomplice, the follower, the man who mixed the bomb, helped plan every detail, then walked away and pretended ignorance. But his hands are drenched in blood just the same as McVeigh's. 168 deaths. 19 children torn apart. And his only defense? I didn't know. Cowardice wears many faces, hides behind many excuses. And sometimes, the worst kind of evil hides behind the pathetic claim of ignorance, refusing to accept responsibility even when the evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. We're halfway through this list, and it only gets darker from here. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Because understanding these minds isn't just fascinating, it's necessary. And the next prisoner's story will prove exactly why. Number 6 is Ramzi Youssef. Born Abdul Basit Mahmoud Abdul Karim in Kuwait on April 27, 1968, Ramzi Youssef grew up in a household divided by ethnicity, politics, and displacement. His father was Pakistani, his mother Palestinian, 2 cultures, 2 identities, constant movement between Kuwait and Pakistan. The family experienced poverty, political instability, and the kind of rootlessness that shapes a person's entire worldview. Youssef was exceptionally intelligent, naturally charismatic, and obsessively fascinated with engineering from a young age. In the late 1980s, he attended the West Glamorgan Institute of Higher Education in Wales, studying electrical engineering. He learned to build circuits, understand explosive compounds, and construct increasingly sophisticated devices. His technical knowledge was impressive, even brilliant. By the early 1990s, Youssef had become deeply radicalized, adopting violent jihadist ideology and anti-American hatred. He traveled to Afghanistan, training extensively in terrorist camps run by Al-Qaeda and other extremist organizations. He learned advanced bomb-making techniques from experts who had fought against the Soviets throughout the 1980s. September 1992. At just 24 years old, Ramzi Youssef arrived in New York City on a fraudulent Iraqi passport. Immigration officials detained him briefly, but he claimed political asylum and was released pending a hearing. He disappeared immediately into the city's immigrant communities. His target had already been chosen in his mind: the World Trade Center. His goal was audaciously simple: topple one tower into the other and kill tens of thousands of Americans in a single catastrophic attack. He would fail to achieve that goal, but he would still leave a permanent legacy of terror that directly foreshadowed something far worse to come. On February 26, 1993, at exactly 12:17 p.m., a massive explosion ripped through the underground parking garage of the World Trade Center's North Tower. Ramzi Youssef and his accomplices had rented a yellow Ford Econoline van, packed it with 1,200 pounds of urea nitrate explosives mixed with hydrogen gas cylinders, and parked it strategically on the B2 level of the garage directly beneath the tower. The bomb detonated with absolutely catastrophic force, creating a crater 200 feet wide and 7 stories deep. The explosion was so powerful it was felt for miles. 6 people were killed instantly: Robert Kirkpatrick, Stephen Knapp, William Macco, Wilfredo Mercado, Monica Rodriguez-Smith, who was 7 months pregnant, and John DiGiovanni. Over 1,000 people were injured, many suffering severe smoke inhalation as toxic fumes filled stairwells and elevator shafts throughout both towers. 50,000 office workers and visitors were evacuated in darkness, chaos, and terror. Port Authority officer John McLaughlin and countless others led desperate rescue efforts, carrying injured victims down dozens of flights of pitch-black stairs. The Twin Towers did not collapse as Yusuf had hoped and planned, but he had sent a chilling, unmistakable message to America. You are vulnerable. You can be reached. You can be hurt. Ramzi Youssef fled the United States that same night, boarding a flight to Pakistan via Pakistan International Airlines, escaping while smoke still poured from the towers. Over the next 2 years, he orchestrated additional terrorist attacks across multiple continents. In December 1994, he tested a sophisticated liquid bomb prototype on Philippine Airlines Flight 434, placing it under a seat cushion. The bomb killed Japanese passenger Haruki Ikegami when it exploded mid-flight, but the skilled pilot miraculously managed to land the crippled plane, saving everyone else aboard. Yusuf was simultaneously planning Operation Bojinka, an elaborate multi-stage plot to simultaneously blow up 11 U.S. commercial airliners over the Pacific Ocean using timed liquid bombs, potentially killing thousands. He also plotted assassinations of Pope John Paul II during an upcoming visit to the Philippines and President Bill Clinton. But on January 6, 1995, a chemical fire in his Manila apartment, caused by an accidental explosion while mixing bomb materials, exposed all his plans to authorities. Yusuf fled immediately, but he was now officially the world's most wanted terrorist. The FBI launched one of the largest international investigations in its history. Within days of the World Trade Center bombing, investigators had recovered a crucial fragment of the Ryder truck's frame from the massive rubble pile, traced it to a rental agency in Jersey City, and identified Mohammed Salameh, one of Yusuf's accomplices, a man foolish enough to try reclaiming his $400 deposit on the destroyed van. Salameh's arrest led investigators to other conspirators, but Yusuf himself had vanished across international borders. The FBI tracked him methodically across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa for nearly 2 years. On February 7, 1995, acting on intelligence from an informant, Pakistani intelligence officers and U.S. agents raided the Sukasa guest house in Islamabad, Pakistan. Yusuf was arrested without resistance. He was immediately extradited to the United States and flown to New York aboard a U.S. military aircraft. As the helicopter carrying him passed over Manhattan at night, an FBI agent pointed down at the illuminated skyline and said, "They're still standing." Yusuf stared at the Twin Towers and replied coldly, without emotion, "They wouldn't be if I had had enough money and explosives." Ramzi Youssef was convicted in November 1997 on all counts related to both the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and the Bojinka plot. Judge Kevin Duffy sentenced him to life in prison without any possibility of parole, plus 240 additional years. At sentencing, Judge Duffy looked directly at Youssef and declared, "You are a virus that must be locked away. You are an enemy of Islam itself." Youssef showed absolutely no remorse, no regret, no acknowledgement of the lives he had destroyed. He is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, locked in solitary confinement on Bombers Row alongside other terrorists. He will never be released. He will die in that cell. 8 years after Ramzi Youssef's failed attack on September 11, 2001, terrorists finally succeeded where he had failed. The Twin Towers did collapse. Nearly 3,000 people died. The method was different, planes instead of truck bombs, but the target and the hatred were exactly the same. Yusuf had been the prophet of 9/11, the architect of a blueprint that others would follow and perfect. His attack was the dress rehearsal for the main event that would come later, and the horror he envisioned, dreamed of, and failed to achieve finally came true in the most devastating terrorist attack in human history. Ramzi Youssef wanted to kill tens of thousands of Americans in a single attack. He wanted the towers to collapse catastrophically into each other, burying Lower Manhattan in rubble and ash, creating a body count that would dwarf anything terrorism had ever achieved. He failed because he lacked sufficient funding and explosives. Number 7 is Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was born July 22, 1993, in Tokmak, Kyrgyzstan, while his Chechen family lived as political refugees. His parents, Anzur and Zubaydat Tsarnaeva, had fled the brutal, ongoing conflicts in Chechnya, desperately seeking safety and opportunity for their children. In 2002, when Dzhokhar was just 8 years old, the family immigrated to Cambridge, Massachusetts, pursuing the American dream. Dzhokhar, affectionately known as Dzhokhar to friends and family, adapted remarkably quickly to American life. He attended Cambridge Ringe and Latin School, where he was genuinely popular, well-liked by peers and teachers alike, and athletic, excelling particularly in wrestling. He won a prestigious city scholarship for academic achievement. Teachers consistently described him as sweet, gentle, friendly, a kid who seemed to embody the best of what America offered immigrants. He enrolled at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth in 2011, studying marine biology with dreams of a scientific career. To his college friends, he seemed like any other American college kid. He smoked marijuana occasionally, attended parties, posted typical content on social media. But his older brother, Tamerlan, a frustrated boxer whose athletic dreams had died and who had become an increasingly radical Islamic extremist, was systematically radicalizing him. The brothers spent hours watching jihadist propaganda online together, absorbing extremist rhetoric about American oppression in Muslim countries, about the duty to fight back. Dzhokhar idolized Tamerlan, following him willingly into darkness. By early 2013, they had made a terrible decision together. They would strike at America. Their target, the Boston Marathon, one of America's oldest and most beloved sporting events. Their weapon, homemade pressure cooker bombs packed with shrapnel. And their victims would be innocent people celebrating life, running toward a finish line they would never cross. On April 15, 2013, Patriots' Day in Boston, over 23,000 runners and thousands of enthusiastic spectators gathered for the 117th Boston Marathon. It was a beautiful spring day, families cheering loudly, children waving American flags, the air filled with celebration and joy. At 2:49 p.m., 2 homemade pressure cooker bombs detonated near the finish line on Boylston Street, positioned 210 yards apart for maximum carnage. The first explosion tore through the crowd at 671 Boylston Street. 12 seconds later, the second bomb exploded near the Forum restaurant. The blasts were specifically designed to maximize human suffering, packed with nails, ball bearings, and metal fragments that shredded flesh and shattered bone. 3 people were killed instantly. Crystal Campbell, 29, a restaurant manager from Medford; Lingzi Liu, 23, a Chinese graduate student at Boston University studying statistics; and Martin Richard, just 8 years old, from Dorchester, who had been watching the race excitedly with his family. His mother and sister were both critically injured in the same blast. Over 260 people were wounded in seconds. 17 people lost legs to the explosions. The scene was absolutely apocalyptic. Thick smoke, blood pooling on sidewalks, screaming, chaos, people running in all directions. First responders rushed directly into the devastation, using belts as makeshift tourniquets, carrying gravely injured victims to ambulances, saving lives in the midst of horror. Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev had watched the explosions from the crowd, blending in with panicked spectators. Then they calmly walked away, disappearing into the chaos. 3 days later, the FBI released clear surveillance images of the suspects to the public. The Tsarnaev brothers panicked. On April 18th, they shot and killed MIT police officer Sean Collier, 27, in his patrol car, attempting to steal his service weapon. They carjacked a Mercedes SUV, holding the terrified driver hostage for 90 agonizing minutes before finally releasing him unharmed. Police tracked them to Watertown, Massachusetts. A violent, prolonged shootout erupted in a residential neighborhood. Tamerlan was shot multiple times by police. As he lay wounded on the ground, Dzhokhar attempted to escape in the stolen SUV, running over his own brother in the process. Tamerlan died at the scene from his injuries. Dzhokhar fled, wounded and bleeding heavily, and hid inside a boat covered by a tarp in a Watertown resident's backyard. After an intense standoff, he was captured alive on April 19, 2013. The FBI meticulously reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage from cameras throughout Boston, identifying the Tsarnaev brothers within just 48 hours of the attack. After the murder of Officer Collier and the Watertown shootout, a massive manhunt essentially locked down the entire city of Boston. Over 9,000 law enforcement officers searched door to door. When Watertown resident David Henberry noticed blood dripping from his boat, he called police immediately. Thermal imaging from police helicopters confirmed someone was hiding inside. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds, had written a confession inside the boat in pencil. The U.S. government is killing our innocent civilians. I can't stand to see such evil go unpunished. Now I don't like killing innocent people, but in this case it is allowed. He was arrested, charged with using a weapon of mass destruction and numerous other terrorism charges, and tried in federal court. The trial lasted 2 emotionally exhausting months. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. On May 15, 2015, a federal jury sentenced Dzhokhar Tsarnaev to death after deliberating his fate. His defense lawyers argued desperately that he had been manipulated and dominated by his older brother, but the jury firmly rejected this defense. Tsarnaev showed no genuine remorse throughout the entire trial. In July 2020, an appeals court temporarily vacated his death sentence, citing technical jury selection errors. But in March 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in a decisive ruling. Tsarnaev currently remains on death row at ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado. He is 31 years old. His victims, 8-year-old Martin Richard, Crystal Campbell, Lingzi Liu, Officer Sean Collier, are gone forever. Their families live with devastating loss every single day. And Dzhokhar Tsarnaev waits in a concrete cell for an execution date that may still be years away, possibly decades given the lengthy appeals process. Justice deferred. Justice delayed. But justice someday will finally be served. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was a popular college kid, a smiling wrestler with friends and a future, a boy who seemed to have everything ahead of him in America, the country that had welcomed his refugee family. Then he built bombs with his brother and murdered an 8-year-old child holding his father's hand. Was he truly radicalized by extremist ideology, or simply manipulated by an older brother he desperately wanted to please? Or was the darkness always there inside him, just waiting for permission to emerge? We may never fully know the answer, but we know this with absolute certainty. 8-year-old Martin Richard will never grow up. He'll never go to high school, never fall in love, never have children of his own. And that is Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's permanent legacy. Innocence stolen forever, childhood ended in fire and shrapnel, a family's future destroyed in 12 seconds of calculated evil. If you're still watching, you're seeing the absolute worst humanity has to offer, and understanding why these men can never be released. Hit that like button to support this channel's mission of exposing the truth about the world's most dangerous criminals. We're not done yet. Number 8 is Larry Hoover. Larry Hoover Sr. was born November 30, 1950, in Jackson, Mississippi. His family migrated north to Chicago's South Side during the Great Migration, seeking better economic opportunities, but instead finding poverty, systemic segregation, and relentless violence. Larry grew up in Englewood, one of Chicago's most dangerous and impoverished neighborhoods, where street gangs ruled through fear and survival often meant choosing sides. As a teenager in the turbulent 1960s, Hoover joined a street gang called the Supreme Gangsters. He possessed natural charisma, sharp intelligence, and absolutely ruthless ambition, qualities that helped him rise rapidly through the ranks. In 1969, at just 18 years old, Hoover and another influential gang leader named David Barksdale merged their respective organizations to form the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, later shortened to Gangster Disciples, known by the initials GD. Their symbol, a 6-pointed star. Their public motto, growth and development. Their reality, drugs, murder, territorial control, and systematic violence. By his early 20s, Larry Hoover had become one of Chicago's most powerful and feared gang leaders, commanding thousands of members across the city. But in 1973, his visible empire began to crumble. Hoover was arrested and convicted of ordering the brutal murder of William Pokey Young, a neighborhood drug dealer. He was sentenced to an astonishing 150 to 200 years in prison. Most people would have disappeared into the prison system, forgotten. But Larry Hoover was just getting started. He would successfully run his criminal empire from behind bars for the next 5 decades, transforming a street gang into a sophisticated criminal organization. Larry Hoover didn't need physical freedom to wield enormous power and influence. From inside various Illinois state prisons, he systematically transformed the Gangster Disciples into one of America's most sophisticated and profitable criminal organizations, with tens of thousands of members operating across the United States. The gang controlled major drug trafficking operations, extortion rackets, robbery, and murder for hire. They operated like a Fortune 500 corporation, with clearly defined ranks, strict rules, and a military-style command structure. Hoover communicated his orders through elaborately coded letters, trusted intermediaries, and carefully monitored prison visits. He issued direct orders for executions, coordinated multi-state drug shipments, and managed territorial expansion. The Gangster Disciples' annual revenue was conservatively estimated at over $100 million, generated primarily from cocaine and heroin distribution throughout American cities. Violence was their primary enforcement mechanism. Rivals were systematically killed. Witnesses were silenced permanently. Entire Chicago neighborhoods lived in constant, paralyzing fear. In the 1990s, while imprisoned, Hoover attempted an audacious rebranding, transforming the Gangster Disciples publicly into what he claimed was a legitimate community organization called Growth and Development. He held press conferences from prison, met with naive politicians, and presented himself convincingly as a reformed leader focused on education and peace. But federal prosecutors saw directly through the elaborate facade. In 1995, they indicted Hoover on federal drug conspiracy and continuing criminal enterprise charges. Extensive evidence demonstrated he had continued running the gang's entire criminal operation from his prison cell, personally ordering murders and coordinating sophisticated multi-state drug trafficking networks.
Federal wiretaps captured coded phone conversations. Informants testified in detail about his direct involvement in ordering hits. Financial records meticulously traced drug proceeds back to accounts controlled by Hoover's outside associates. The federal case was absolutely airtight. Hoover wasn't a community leader. He was a crime boss. And in 1997, a federal jury convicted him on all counts. In 1998, Judge Wayne Anderson sentenced him to 6 consecutive life sentences, to be served only after completing his existing state sentence. Hoover was transferred to ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, where he spent nearly 30 years in complete solitary confinement, locked in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell 23 hours every single day. No contact with other inmates. No phone calls. No visitors except attorneys. Complete isolation. The federal investigation into Larry Hoover spanned many years, involving coordinated efforts from the FBI, DEA, and ATF. Agents used sophisticated wiretaps, undercover informants embedded in the organization, and financial tracking to build an ironclad case. They intercepted hundreds of coded communications between Hoover in prison and gang leaders operating freely on the streets, meticulously documenting his continued absolute control over drug trafficking, extortion, and violence. Former high-ranking gang members testified against him, detailing exactly how orders flowed seamlessly from Hoover in his cell to violent enforcers on Chicago streets. The prosecution demonstrated conclusively that Hoover had never relinquished power. He had simply adapted brilliantly to his incarcerated circumstances. His 1997 trial lasted weeks. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: phone records, financial documents, witness testimony. Hoover's defense claimed unconvincingly that he had renounced gang life. The jury didn't believe it for a second. He was convicted on all counts. In May 1998, he received his federal sentence: life imprisonment without any possibility of parole. Larry Hoover spent nearly 3 full decades at ADX Florence, completely isolated from the world. In May 2025, President Donald Trump commuted Hoover's federal sentence, citing prison reform advocacy and intensive lobbying efforts by celebrities including Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. However, Hoover remains imprisoned in Illinois on his original 1973 murder conviction, still facing his 150 to 200-year state sentence. He is now 74 years old. The Gangster Disciples still operate actively in Chicago and cities across America, with thousands of members. Hoover's direct leadership may have ended, but his legacy of violence continues unabated. Families still bury children killed in ongoing gang wars. Communities still live in fear, and Chicago's streets still bleed. Larry Hoover built a criminal empire from a prison cell, controlling drugs, guns, and death through coded letters and whispered orders. He tried desperately to rebrand himself as a misunderstood community leader, but the bodies told the truth. Now, at 74, he remains behind bars, not at ADX Florence anymore, but still in Illinois custody, where his original murder conviction still legally binds him. Power fades, influence diminishes, but consequences endure forever. Number 9 is Richard Reed. Richard Colvin Reed was born August 12, 1973, in Bromley, London, England, to a white British mother and a Jamaican father. His childhood was turbulent and unstable. His parents divorced when he was young, and Reed quickly drifted into petty crime as a teenager, committing burglary and theft to survive. He was imprisoned multiple times in British youth detention centers for minor offenses. While incarcerated, Reed converted to Islam, later claiming it gave his aimless life purpose and moral direction. But his understanding of the faith was dangerously shallow and distorted, shaped almost entirely by extremist literature and radical imams rather than genuine theological study. After his release in the mid-1990s, Reed became increasingly radicalized. He began attending the Brixton Mosque in South London, where he encountered and was recruited by jihadist operatives. By 1998, Reed had traveled to Pakistan and Afghanistan, training extensively at al-Qaeda terrorist camps. He learned sophisticated bomb-making techniques, absorbed radical theology, and embraced martyrdom ideology. He met senior al-Qaeda leaders, including Osama bin Laden himself. In 2001, shortly after the devastating September 11th attacks, Reed was given a specific mission: board a transatlantic flight from Paris to Miami and detonate a sophisticated bomb hidden in his shoes mid-flight, killing everyone aboard. He accepted the suicide mission without hesitation. He was 28 years old, and he nearly succeeded in mass murder on December 22, 2001. Just 3 months after September 11th, Richard Reed boarded American Airlines Flight 63 from Paris to Miami. The Boeing 767 carried 197 passengers and crew members. Reed was traveling alone, appearing disheveled and highly suspicious to trained observers. He had purchased a one-way ticket with cash and carried no checked luggage. But security screeners at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, despite their concerns, ultimately allowed him through. Reed took his assigned seat in row 29 and waited. 90 minutes into the flight, over the vast Atlantic Ocean with no possibility of emergency landing, Reed removed his black leather sneakers. Hidden inside each shoe was sophisticated plastic explosive called PETN, combined with TATP, a highly unstable compound. The bombs were powerful enough to blow a catastrophic hole in the fuselage, instantly depressurizing the cabin and causing the plane to crash into the ocean, killing everyone aboard. Reed struck a match, attempting to light the fuse embedded in his shoe. The distinct smell of sulfur immediately filled the air. Flight attendant Hermes Moutardia noticed smoke and approached him to investigate. Reed violently pushed her away. She screamed for help. Passengers and crew members immediately rushed toward Reed. He fought back desperately, biting, kicking, and shouting in Arabic. He managed to light another match, but the fuse had been inadvertently dampened by sweat from his feet during the long flight. It stubbornly wouldn't ignite. Passengers successfully subdued him, binding him tightly with seatbelts, headphone cords, and leather straps. A doctor aboard the flight injected Reed with sedatives from the plane's emergency medical kit. The pilots immediately diverted the flight to Boston Logan International Airport, where FBI agents arrested Reed the moment the plane landed. Bomb technicians later confirmed the shoes contained more than enough military-grade explosives to completely destroy the aircraft in flight. Richard Reed had been literally seconds away from committing mass murder. 200 lives were saved because his feet sweated, because alert passengers fought back courageously, because a fuse was too wet to ignite. Upon landing in Boston, FBI agents arrested Richard Reed and immediately seized the explosive-laden shoes as evidence. Forensic analysis definitively confirmed the presence of PTN and TATP, both military-grade explosives. Reed's fingerprints and DNA were found on the devices, proving he had constructed them himself. He had acted alone on the flight itself, but intelligence agencies quickly traced his connections to al-Qaeda operatives in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Reed initially refused to cooperate with investigators at all, invoking his jihadist ideology and proudly declaring his allegiance to Osama bin Laden. In October 2002, Reed pleaded guilty to 8 terrorism-related charges, including attempted use of a weapon of mass destruction, attempted homicide, and placing an explosive device on an aircraft. At his sentencing hearing on January 30, 2003, Reed addressed Judge William Young directly, stating he was a soldier of Allah and that his only regret was failing to successfully detonate the bomb and complete his martyrdom mission. Judge William Young responded with one of the most powerful and memorable judicial rebukes in American legal history. Judge William Young sentenced Richard Reed to life imprisonment without any possibility of parole, plus 110 additional years. Judge Young looked directly at Reed and stated firmly, "You are not a soldier, you are a terrorist, a species of criminal guilty of multiple attempted murders. You are not a martyr, you are a failure." Reed showed absolutely no visible emotion. He was sent to ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, where he remains in solitary confinement to this day. His failed attack led to permanent worldwide changes in aviation security. Passengers must now remove their shoes at airport security checkpoints globally. Every single day, millions of travelers around the world are reminded of Richard Reed's failed attempt to murder 197 innocent people. He desperately wanted to be remembered as a jihadist warrior, a holy martyr. Instead, he is remembered worldwide as the shoe bomber, a pathetic, incompetent terrorist whose greatest lasting legacy is making air travel slightly more inconvenient for everyone. His intended victims lived. Their children grew up. Their families remained intact. And Richard Reed will die alone in a concrete cage, forgotten, irrelevant, having achieved absolutely nothing except his own imprisonment. Richard Reed tried to blow up a commercial airliner with explosives hidden in his shoes. He failed completely because of sweat, because of brave passengers who refused to be victims, because of a fuse too wet to ignite. Now he sits in a concrete cell for 23 hours every day. His martyrdom permanently denied. His mission utterly forgotten. We remove our shoes at airports because of him. That is his entire legacy, a minor inconvenience, a few extra minutes in security lines. Not a martyr, not a soldier, not a hero to anyone, just a complete and utter failure whose name will fade into deserved obscurity. Number 10 is Zacarias Moussaoui. Zacarias Moussaoui was born May 30, 1968, in Saint-Jean-de-Luz, France, to Moroccan immigrant parents struggling to survive. His childhood was marked by severe poverty, domestic violence, and profound instability. His father was violently abusive. His mother struggled desperately to support 4 children alone. Moussaoui was a troubled, angry child who grew into an increasingly resentful young man. In the early 1990s, he moved to London, where he studied business at South Bank University. It was there, in London's radical mosques, that Zacarias Moussaoui became radicalized. He attended the Brixton Mosque, notorious for its extremist preaching, and fell under the direct influence of jihadist recruiters. By 1998, he had traveled to Afghanistan and trained in al-Qaeda camps, learning combat tactics, explosives, and martyrdom ideology. He met senior al-Qaeda operatives and pledged absolute allegiance to Osama bin Laden. In 2001, Moussaoui was selected for a special critical mission. He would be part of a coordinated massive attack on the United States. He was sent to America to train as a commercial pilot, but his erratic behavior and suspicious questions immediately raised alarms. On August 16, 2001, less than 1 month before September 11th, FBI agents arrested him at a flight school in Minnesota. He was in federal custody when the Twin Towers fell. He is known historically as the 20th hijacker, the one who didn't make it onto any of the planes, but his connection to 9/11 would haunt him forever. Zacarias Moussaoui was not physically on any of the 4 planes hijacked on September 11, 2001, but he was absolutely part of the plot. In early 2001, Moussaoui entered the United States on a tourist visa. He enrolled in flight training schools in Oklahoma and Minnesota, paying cash for expensive lessons on Boeing 747 flight simulators. He had absolutely no interest in learning to take off or land aircraft, only in steering large commercial planes mid-flight. Flight instructors found this extremely suspicious. His behavior was consistently erratic, aggressive, and secretive. On August 16, 2001, the manager of the Pan Am International Flight Academy in Minnesota alerted the FBI about Moussaoui's suspicious behavior. Moussaoui was arrested on immigration violations. FBI agents searched his belongings and found deeply disturbing materials: names of jihadist contacts, flight training manuals, and clear evidence of communication with Al-Qaeda operatives abroad. But FBI headquarters inexplicably denied field agents urgent requests for a warrant to search his laptop computer, citing what they claimed was insufficient evidence. 3 weeks later, on September 11, 2001, 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked 4 commercial planes and crashed them into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people died. After the attacks, investigators realized with horror that Moussaoui had been an integral part of the operation. His laptop contained extensive evidence linking him directly to the hijackers and Al-Qaeda leadership. He had received $14,000 from the exact same funding sources that financed the 19 hijackers. He had trained at the same Afghan camps. He had been intended as a replacement pilot, ready to step in if any of the original hijackers were unable to participate. Zacarias Moussaoui remains the only person ever convicted in a U.S. court for direct involvement in the September 11th attacks. His trial became a bizarre spectacle. He fired his court-appointed lawyers and represented himself, delivering rambling, incoherent speeches praising Al-Qaeda and insulting the judge. He pleaded guilty to 6 counts of conspiracy, including conspiracy to commit terrorism and murder thousands of Americans. The legal question wasn't guilt, it was punishment. After September 11th, federal prosecutors charged Moussaoui with conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism, aircraft piracy, and mass murder. His trial, held in federal court in Virginia, lasted from 2002 to 2006. Moussaoui repeatedly fired his court-appointed lawyers and insisted on representing himself, delivering bizarre, rambling speeches praising Al-Qaeda, celebrating the 9/11 attacks, and insulting the judge. He pleaded guilty in April 2005, openly admitting his role in the 9/11 conspiracy. During the penalty phase, prosecutors aggressively sought the death penalty, arguing Moussaoui's actions contributed directly to the deaths of nearly 3,000 innocent people. The defense argued he was severely mentally ill, a delusional, incompetent operative whom Al-Qaeda leadership did not trust with important responsibilities. Witnesses testified extensively to his erratic, unstable behavior. On May 3, 2006, after 7 days of intense deliberation, the jury voted for life imprisonment rather than death, citing Moussaoui's obvious mental instability and his relatively limited operational role. Judge Leonie Brinkema sentenced Zacarias Moussaoui to 6 consecutive life sentences without any possibility of parole. She looked directly at him and stated, "You came here to be a martyr and die in a great big bang of glory, but you will die with a whimper." Moussaoui was sent to ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, where he remains in solitary confinement. He spends 23 hours every day alone in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell. He will never be released. He will die in that cell. In 2014, Moussaoui wrote a letter from prison claiming he had been part of an additional plot to shoot down Air Force One with President George W. Bush aboard, but investigators immediately dismissed the claims as complete fabrications designed to gain attention. He is 56 years old. He will die in prison, forgotten by the world, his martyrdom permanently denied. His name merely a footnote in a tragedy he helped orchestrate but could not complete. Zacarias Moussaoui desperately wanted to be a 9/11 hijacker. He wanted to crash a plane into the White House or Capitol building. He wanted glory, martyrdom, and a permanent place in history. Instead, he sits in a cell, alone, irrelevant, and forgotten. Nearly 3,000 people died on September 11, 2001. Their names are etched in memorials at Ground Zero, the Pentagon, and Shanksville. Moussaoui's name appears nowhere. He wanted desperately to be remembered as a holy warrior. We collectively chose to forget him entirely, denying him even that small satisfaction. 10 men, 10 different paths to the same destination. A concrete cell they'll never leave. From mathematical geniuses to drug kingpins, from FBI agents who betrayed their country to terrorists who tried to bring it to its knees. These are the prisoners so dangerous that even maximum security wasn't enough. They needed ADX Florence. They needed 23-hour solitary confinement. They needed to be erased from society, locked away where they can never harm anyone again. But here's what should terrify you. For every one of these men locked in Supermax, how many others are out there right now, planning, plotting, one decision away from joining them? If this video opened your eyes to the razor-thin line between freedom and a lifetime in concrete, do 3 things. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling us which case disturbed you most, and why. Turn on notifications because we're bringing you more cases that expose the darkest corners of the human mind, the criminals who changed history, and the prisons designed to hold pure evil. Thanks for watching. Stay aware, stay vigilant, and remember, these men were once free, walking among us, looking just like everyone else. Until they weren't.